I'm Aaron, founder of Reality Emotive Systems Theory. In other videos, I've talked about bubbles of reality. In this video, I'm going to talk about how those bubbles of reality interact with one another. Specifically in this video, I'm going to talk about how you can have bubbles of reality that can be therapeutic and also can be manipulative. We're going to talk about a therapeutic relationship with the bubbles of reality. So let's say that we have a client who's depressed. This client here comes to therapy because their perception of reality is very gloomy, very depressing, and they want to get out of this kind of perception of reality. And so they go to this therapist to help them have perspective. The therapist here has his own perspective of reality, but he also enlarges his perspective of reality to include the client's perspective of reality. So what this does is the therapist can have empathy for the client, can see the client's perspective, can be therapeutic. And all the time that the therapist can say, I see where you're coming from, I know what you're going through, but it's important for the therapist to stay in his own perspective of reality. If the therapist kind of loses focus and gets sucked in to the client's perspective of reality, so we'll put here depression. So we have the client have depression. Those S's are terrible. And the therapist has empathy for the client, but then all of a sudden it turns into sympathy. And the therapist becomes triggered, and all of a sudden both of them are in a bubble of reality of depression. Both of them become depressed. The therapist gets sucked in to this client's perspective. But let's go back. But let's say that the therapist here is strong in his perception of reality of, we'll just say, peace of mind. And so they both are in these, have their own perspectives of reality, but the therapist is open-minded to see the client's perspective. Because the client can see that the therapist understands them and sees their perspective, the client once in a while will burst this bubble and then the client will be able to see the therapist's perspective and be in this bubble of peace or peaceful mind. And because the client has a moment of seeing the therapist's perspective. But unfortunately, the client usually jumps right back. In a therapeutic relationship, they try to continue to move back and forth between this depressive state and the state of peace. But the therapist, they model this mind of peace. But they can't be effective unless they see the client. Once in a while, the therapist might be overwhelmed or are thinking about their own issues at home. Say, I have to pay the bills or whatever. And then all of a sudden they're not seeing the client's perspective. And what that does is it doesn't allow a healthy therapeutic relationship because he's too consumed with his own problems, his own bills. So this is the best way to help somebody get out of a bad perspective of reality is to make sure that you're seeing your own perspective, which is the place where you want the client to go to, while at the same time being able to see their perspective of reality so that you can help them get out of it. And there is also a manipulative way that people interact in this. Let's say that this person here is a sales rep. And this sales rep, he can see the potential customer. So we'll put this guy sales and customer. So this sales rep sees this customer, and he could take a healthy sales approach like the therapist, just trying to see the client's perspective and allowing the client to allowing the customer to open their mind to what the sales guy has to do. That would be a healthy sales approach. Unfortunately, not all salesmen do that. Some salesmen will see the client's or the customer's perspective of reality. The sales guy will say, "Hey, I see what you're going through," and use the customer's perspective of reality to guilt them or manipulate them into getting the product. And the way they do that is they don't open the customer's mind. In fact, they narrow it. They start to narrow this bubble so tightly, really tight, but tightly on one specific thing. Probably maybe a fire. So if this guy is selling home security, he'll say, "Beware of a fire." And they can see this customer's perspective, and they see that this customer struggles with this fear of fires. So they manipulate the customer to just focus on fires, focusing on that problem. And it helps the sales guy get the sale, but unfortunately, let's say a day or two goes by, and the customer, after a couple days, their mind is expanded again to where it used to be, and they're seeing all these other aspects that they need to focus on, and they realize, oh, it's a lot more money than I expected. Oh, it's not safe in as much as another program, or it's not really safe in other areas, but it is helpful with fires, but not in these other areas. And so what that creates is a buyer's remorse, which is really bad for customers and sales reps. So manipulative approaches are not really helpful unless you're just going for that quick sale, which I still am not really supportive of. It's best to help the client expand their perspective to see your perspective rather than narrow their perspective to only focus on the things that I need to protect myself from this fire, or I need to protect myself in one way or another. The basics behind it is manipulation narrows perspective, and therapeutic or healthy expands the perspective of reality. If you enjoyed this video, please go to our website to learn more